Yesterday, Erica Cobb totally owned it. It was the primary election in Georgia, and turns out it was a disaster, like Erica said at the very end of our show yesterday, at a number of polling places. Specifically black communities, right, were reportedly some of the hardest hit. Lines stretched around the block. People waited for hours just to cast their ballot. The New York Times reports it was a full-scale meltdown of the state's new voting system. Some local residents pitched in to help, passing out supplies to people who are waiting for 4 or 5 hours to vote. I do want to let you know it was a hot day out there, so bravo for all of those that stayed in line. This was all going on yesterday during our show, and again, as I said, Erica called it out. Let's take a look at that.
I do want to have a slight call to action for anyone who considers themselves an ally in Black Lives Matter. Today is voting day.
Yes.
For North Dakota, West Virginia, Georgia, South Carolina, and Nevada. There are reports coming out of multiple districts, predominantly black communities, that are not being allowed to vote, or there is suspicious activity happening in the voting booth. Allies, we need you. This is at the Sandtown precinct in South Fulton County. This is not the only one. We need you to use Twitter, spread the message, make sure that no county is being hindered or disallowed the right to vote. This is when being an ally means something. Your voice matters in every capacity. Make sure that every community is allowed to vote, and do not allow them to slow down this process. This is our right, it is our responsibility, and we need all hands on deck today and for every voting day. This is what you're being called to do today. Please help.
Want to be ahead on the news? You tune into DBL and listen to Erica Cobb. Georgia's Secretary of State blamed local officials in Fulton County, which is most of Atlanta, and now there's an investigation underway. But Stacey Abrams, if you don't know who that is, she ran against the governor, Brian Kemp. She lost to some sketchy results, said it's emblematic of the deep systematic issues we have here in Georgia. Voters get hurt, and that's what we see happening in Georgia today. Myrna Perez, Erica, Director of Voting Rights at the Brennan Center for Justice in New York, says we can no longer kneel on the neck of democracy, and that's what this is. How do you respond to that?
The reason why I address specifically allies is because I think that people are in the middle of a awakening. And once you've considered yourself an ally, that means you cannot go back to sleep on this. Voter suppression is something that my grandmother talked to me about, my aunts and uncles, like that. This is something that is so ingrained in our system that most people who just get their mail-in ballot and they send it in, or they show up to the polls, and a lot of times it takes, what, 15, 20 minutes. This is such a foreign idea to so many people, except for black people,
right?
Because we have been told that all the different ways in which our voices are suppressed. People show up to vote, they show up to exercise their civic duty, and then there's yet another barricade. That's why I called upon allies, because we need for people to understand, just like you saw with your own 2 eyes, a man's life being taken by a police officer, you need to trust your eyes, as Mike Brown Sr. and Anthony Shahid just said from Chosen for Change. Trust what you are seeing, because what you are seeing is real. This is the way that voices are silenced. If you want to be a part of change, then you have to be a part of calling out and demanding that people are able to vote in a timely manner, not have to spend 8 hours of the day in the hot heat in order to exercise their civic duty. It is criminal, and it is unfortunate in every way.
That is so well said. That's disenfranchisement in motion. Brandon, do you want to follow up on that?
I mean, it's just powerful because, Erica, when you said that this is what our grandparents had told us about, another thing that they were suppressing and had to be quiet on, in a way, or silence. It's funny because now you're seeing people standing out there for 5 hours, 6 hours, 7 hours, and still waiting in line to vote in that heat. That's paying homage to our grandparents, yes, and those who weren't able to do that. So yes, I love the fact that the people stood out there and still weathered the storm or the heat and still went out there and voted, for sure.
I agree. And remember, people died fighting for those rights.